All right, everybody. All right, so if you read the title and you read the headline, it says World Conversations. New President of Syria, Ahmed Al-Sharaa. And I hope I am saying your name right. I hope I'm not butchering your name, because that's not what I'm about. I don't like to butcher people's names. So if anyone knows anything about what's going on in Syria in the last several years, there's been a lot of conflict that took place up in Syria, and there's still conflict being brought around to this day. But it's not being how it was. It's not as bad as what it used to be. But now that can change. We don't know. The person that we were about to watch an interview on, he was a member of Al-Qaeda, and he was a jihadist, and he helped on the taking of Assad, the Syrian president of Syria, a couple of years back. And here, the last couple of months, he has been putting himself out on the world stage, meeting with world leaders, Turkey, Europe, United States, probably a handful of others. I know he's got connectional ties to Saudi Arabia, but if you're a world leader, it seems like everybody has ties to Saudi Arabia and ties to Israel, and some people don't like to bow to Israel, and that's where you got the conflicts that are also taking place, because it does seem like Israel has too much power and control over all these nations. But I'm just gonna about that, because I'm one of those people that they don't want to have talking about certain things, and they don't want me viewing certain things. So this right here, we're about to view in, because I'm a person who reads between the lines. I want y'all to realize that really fast. I read between the lines. So some of you are bad, evil people. So if there's bad, evil people, there are good, harmonistic people in this world. And we're always in a spiritual battle. We're always in a spiritual war. So let's get into this. I'm going to mute this, and we're just going to listen. I'll jump in whenever I feel like I have to say something. But right now, we are investigating. We are digging down and finding the root cause to how we can create world peace. So let's get into it.
Mr. President, it's strange for me sitting with you, because we were both in Iraq together in 2003, but we were on different sides. I was part of the American-British occupation, and you were fighting for Al-Qaeda against the occupation. And I never imagined I would sit down like this to talk to you in this way. Welcome to The Rest is Politics Leading, with me, Rory Stewart.
And with me, Alistair Campbell. And you're about to listen to an interview that Rory and I did a few days ago in Damascus, in the Palace of the People, as Bashar al-Assad insisted on calling it, which is now occupied by a man that many of you will know as Al-Jalani, but actually is called now President Ahmed Al-Sharaa. And a really, really interesting interview. You've just been in Saudi Arabia.
Your whiteboarding app is boxing you in.
Oh my
Step
God.
beyond the ideation phase with Lucid. The only.
Tell us what you were doing there,
All the ads.
what you were hoping
I gotta
to
get rid of
achieve,
that, so I'm gonna have to probably
what you
get
did achieve.
YouTube Red.
In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Welcome to Damascus. To begin with, Saudi Arabia is where I was born, and I had always dreamed of going back there. That's at a personal level. Speaking as a head of state, I wanted my first visit to be to a major Arab country. And so, when I received an urgent invitation from the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, I took him up on it right away, because I thought It was a good idea for my first visit to be to Saudi Arabia. It's a country with a special status and influence in our region.
ذلك لمكانتها في المنطقة.
Does it not feel very strange to be the president now? You're in this palace that Assad was in. You've been a fighter, you've been a prisoner, you've been a warrior, you've been a leader, and now you're president. Does this not feel very, very strange?
يعني كنت مقاتل.
I was a fighter, but it wasn't
Human.
because I wanted to fight. And today, I am the president, but it's not because I wanted to be president. Syrians endured terrible oppression for 60 years. During the past 14 years, their society has been systematically destroyed. People were displaced, murdered, killed with chemical weapons, and tortured in the regime's prisons. The regime did not take up on any of the political solutions that were offered to it. It refused to meet any of the people's demands. After things escalated and fighting began, it was offered lots of political solutions from regional countries and the international community, but it refused any political solution and continued to destroy Syrian society.
يرفض أي حل سياسي سوى الاستمرار في تدمير المجتمع.
So we say in English that the child is father of the man, and sometimes we feel that our childhood helps to make us. Can you share anything about your childhood and the values of your childhood that helped you become the person you are today?
أنا من عائلة في الأساس.
My family comes originally from the Golan, now occupied by the Israeli state. I was born in Saudi Arabia,
The
I
Golan
lived in
Heights.
Damascus, then went to Iraq, and finally came back to Syria for the sake of the blessed Syrian revolution. So my life had many stages, and during this journey, I was introduced to many ideas. In my childhood, I was like any other child. I lived in a neighborhood that was well off, middle class or upper middle class. I went to elementary school in Damascus, then middle school and high school. After that, during my first year in college, war broke out in Iraq. I felt that I had to go there. Our region, generally back then, was going through a difficult time. This was when the Intifada was happening in occupied Palestine, and many Palestinians were killed, especially in 2000 and 2001 and 2002. I'm from a sort of a political family.
So, if anyone wonders why I am so fascinated by world leaders, it's because I feel like I'm going to be meeting these world leaders here in the next 10 years. That's a pretty bold statement to say for someone, a regular, everyday, average Joe like me. A guy who is jumping on YouTube with 1 subscriber, which is my main page. Like, nobody knows what I'm doing yet. But this is where I want people to start knowing what I'm doing. And I want to start having debates. And I want to start talking and hearing what you guys have to say and what your thoughts are. And how do you think we can make this world a better place? How do you think we can make the United States a better place? Because that will be my goals when I run for president, the independent spot. And I know we've never had an independent win before. We've had Ross Perot almost win, but lost. That's, I don't know. I'm speaking a pipe dream, but we're going to see in 2032, 2036.
Family. My father had been a political refugee in Iraq, and he wrote about political issues for Saudi and Syrian newspapers. We talked about politics in our home.
والبيت كان يعني فيه حديث سياسي كبير.
Your father was a leading figure in the Damascus Spring, and in the end, the Damascus Spring was not successful. What lessons did you learn from that failure? Was the problem for the Damascus Spring ideological or tactical?
بشكل عام الثقافة
Generally, there is a strong political culture in Arab societies, but ordinary people have no experience of practical politics because Arab regimes don't let them take part in it. And without that experience, they can't have a correct practical understanding of political reality. Also, in a country like Syria, there wasn't any forum for engaging in practical politics. So the Damascus Spring was born dead.
ربيع دمشق ولد ميتا يعني.
You were in Iraq as a fighter for 3 years and then in prison for 5 years. What was it like being in a prison? How did that change you? What did it teach you? And how did you become this figure that rose so quickly through the ranks of the various organizations that involved
That's
in
always the
insurgency?
question. How does
كما
one
ذكرت
rise
في
so
ذاك الوقت
quickly?
كان عمري أنا
As I mentioned, back then I was 19 years old or so when I started to realize just how much oppression there was in Syria and the wider region. The Palestinian Intifada had a big impact on me psychologically. I felt the need to learn, and I read a lot about Damascus and Syria, the incredible depth of its history and the great civilization it represents, as it is the first city known to humans. I often walked through the alleyways of old Damascus, and I could feel history speaking from every corner. But at the same time, I could see the state of the country and the appalling way that the former government was running the country. I felt pain for the burden that Damascus carried and how the regime was abusing Syrian society
always throw
and this
signs.
ancient city. I believed that this
I'm calling
regime
y'all
should
out.
fall. But at that
I'm calling
time,
y'all out.
we didn't have the means or the
They're gonna go
experience.
down.
So I decided to go to wherever I could gain some experience. This was at the same time that the Americans were preparing to enter Iraq. There was a strong Arab and Islamic reaction against what the Americans were doing. So I had two reasons for going there. First, I saw it as an opportunity to learn and gain valuable experience by witnessing a total war, so that I could return to Syria and benefit from the knowledge I would gain. Secondly, I was driven by the passion and youthful spirit I had to defend the people of Iraq from occupation. You may not understand that, but you have to remember that I was a young man then, and I had a particular mindset. So I went to Iraq and worked with various different groups. Eventually, these groups, one by one, started to shrink and merge into Al-Qaeda. And that is how I found myself with Al-Qaeda.
And tell us about the life in prison.
Wow.
In Iraq, I was put in prison early on.
Interesting.
I was sent to the infamous Abu Ghraib prison, where people were being tortured.
He's definitely got an interesting story and a history line of having a normal life, a normal kid, and growing up in, a different country, different environment. So things are definitely different over there than it is over here in America. Over here in America, I feel like we've just got a luxury life. And over there, there's been a lot of oppression. There's been a lot of things. There's a lot of rich history over in the Middle East. And I've always had a fascination over the Middle East. The very first book that I read in the Bible was Revelations. So that was pretty intense reading that as your first book to dive into the Bible. The most scariest book is talking about the end of the world and all nations coming against nations and kingdoms against kingdoms. And that's what I'm watching for. I'm watching every way of how kingdoms are going against kingdoms and nations are going against nations. Now, is there any stopping this? No, not right now. I can't do anything to stop it. All I can do is learn and figure out the playbook and figure out how these people operate. Because that's how you achieve world peace. It's figuring out how all these people operate and how you can relate to them. But that's the thing. I'm a regular everyday person, so I'm not a politician. I'm not a warman. I'm a family man. I'm an independent business owner. I make merchandise. I do videography. I do photography. I do this. You can check out all my other stuff on IG, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. You know, I've been doing this stuff, talking about global ordeals and things that people don't like to talk about. So this is one thing that people do not want to talk about. I didn't even know about this literally until today. I didn't know about this individual until today. So he is someone new under my radar. So I do not know who this person is, especially when it comes to world leaders. So let's get into it.
Then I moved to Buka prison. After that, I was moved to Kropa prison in Baghdad, and finally to Taji prison before being released. So during this tour of prisons, I got to know a lot of people, and I was myself becoming more politically mature. So I came to see that there was a big difference between what I stood for and some of the ideas that I was hearing from other prisoners, which were really shocking to me.
But are you actually good or bad? And that's the thing. I just don't know. Like, I have to view everybody's intentions and what their life has brought into their, like, what do they want their mark of destiny to be for them, for themselves? What mark do they want to leave for this world? And honestly, a lot of these world leaders, they're not leaving a good mark for themselves. They say it's being good for their nation or the stability and to show strength. But what are people going to remember you as? How are people going to remember you? And that's the biggest thing. That can change an entire timeline, is how people remember you.
I mean, this was at a time when sectarian conflict was causing a lot of problems in Iraq, and I had no part in that at all. Even inside the prison, I did not operate the same way as others. As a result, I came in for criticism from some of the other prisoners who believed in what later became ISIS's ideology. During my time in Iraq, especially while in prison, I focused on planning my return to Syria. Even before the revolution began, I talked to a few people, particularly some Syrians, who were also in prison. It was by fate that I was released just 2 days before the Syrian revolution started. As soon as I could, I quickly made arrangements and went back to Syria. I had set some conditions beforehand. First, that we would not repeat the Iraq experience in Syria. We wouldn't take part in any kind of sectarian war. Our focus was going to be on fighting the regime. I came to Syria with a small group of people, about 5 or 6 of us. In a year, this number grew to 5,000, and I had reached across almost all Syrian provinces. Al-Qaeda in Iraq were surprised to see that. Then they wanted to do in Syria what they had done in Iraq, which I strongly opposed. This led to a major conflict between us, during which more than 1,200 of my people were killed, and I lost 70% of my forces. We regrouped, we stayed focused on fighting the regime. We also had to tackle some threats on the margin from ISIS and groups like that.
حرب النظام مع معالجة بعض المخاطر الجانبية من دواعش وغيرهم يعني.
It's strange for me sitting with you because we were both in Iraq together in 2003, but we were on different sides. I was part of the American-British occupation, and you were fighting for Al-Qaeda against the occupation. And I never imagined I would sit down like this to talk to you in this way. What do you reflect over time on this experience and looking back over these years on that moment?
أنا أعتقد أنه هذا السؤال يحتاج إلى
This question needs a very long answer. It would take about 10 episodes like this one. I'm willing to have that discussion, but given my current position, a brief answer to such a large question would expose Syria to much criticism. I don't want to put Syria in that situation right now. I'm fully prepared to answer all your questions and also add some points you may not be aware of. But we would need ample time to do justice to this question.
ثم يكون هناك مسارعة في الحلول الصفرية.
Both of us have been over this very strange journey over 22 years. What do you think it says about the fact we can now sit down and talk when 22 years ago we were fighting? What does this mean about the world?
هو أهم شيء أن
What is crucial is that policies should be looked at again. Policies need to be reviewed if we are to avoid making the same mistakes.
I
I
agree.
often changed my
I
own
agree.
decisions based on what I saw around me. I saw things happening that I did not like, and I looked again at how we were doing things. I wasn't a big, powerful decision maker then, but neither was I just that passionate young man who found himself a member of Al-Qaeda. At the same time, Western policies towards the Middle East at that time were the wrong policies and needed to be changed. And we don't want the peoples of the region to bear the consequences of poor decisions every 10 years.
أن تكون شعوب ضحية قرارات خاطئة كل 10 سنوات.
Would you say now you want to project yourself to the world as
So, one thing I find crazy, back in 2013, I got in an injury. I got in a body slam injury, and I got my skull fractured in 2 layers. I got my tailbone cracked in 2 places, and I got my meniscus messed up. I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to be an intelligence officer in the Army, and that didn't get to happen for me in life. And you know, it's just crazy. I could have actually known who this person could have been. I don't know. Things could have been really, really different for me when it comes into this political game. Instead of going and fighting the enemy or what they say is our enemy head on, I'm watching the people who control our armies. And I think that's the bigger fight, is looking at our people who are controlling our soldiers. I'm just going to leave it at that.
a man of peace? And how do you intend to build relations with countries that remain very, very suspicious?
المنطقة عندنا تعبت كثير.
In our region, we are tired of war, and especially in Syria. Humanity cannot live without peace and security. That's what people look for, not war. So, there are many things that can bring people together.
Peace and
lead
security,
to peaceful
then
solutions
sudden
without
destruction.
resorting to fighting. What unites us as a humanity in peace is far greater than what divides us in war.
أكثر مما يفرقنا في الحرب.
Mr. President,
War
there's a
doesn't do
practical
anything good
challenge,
for
which
anybody
is inside
except for the
HTS,
people in power.
the old HTS, were many different movements. And some of them are more extreme. And some of them maybe would be angry that you are sitting down with someone like me. How do you manage, as you become the president, all these old factions, even the more extreme ones?
لا أعتقد يعني.
I think saying that sitting here with you wouldn't be allowed is a big exaggeration. It's not as bad as that. I used persuasion and dialogue with all these people until we agreed on a proper and suitable formula so that we could live side by side and achieve the goals of the revolution. Many people agreed on this, and through experience, awareness, and extensive dialogue and discussion, we reached very positive results without having to fight each other.
وسائل يعني سيئة وعسكرية يعني.
Some of the people we've been talking to today think that your first statements were very, very positive, very inclusive, but now want to see, when is the National Congress going to come? When can they be guaranteed a constitution? And when might they hope to see elections? Do you have a clear time frame in your mind for that?
يعني في سوريا نحن نمر في عدة مراحل.
Syria is going through many stages. The priority was to stabilize the government to prevent the state institutions from collapsing. We had the Idlib government ready to take over once we seized Damascus. We allowed 3 months for this. Then we will move to the next phase involving a constitutional declaration, the National Congress, and the appointment of the presidency. We appointed a president through international conventions after consulting constitutional experts. The victorious forces appointed the president, abolished the previous constitution, and dissolved the former parliament. Now we will move to national dialogue, which will involve a wide range of people, leading to recommendations that pave the way for the declaration of a new constitution. A temporary parliament will be formed, and this parliament will establish a constitutional committee to draft the new constitution.
البرلمان المؤقت سيشكل لجنة دستورية لصياغة
There's some
الدستور.
cryptic
Mr.
wording
President,
in
it
that
must
right
feel
there.
to you like
That's
a
cryptic.
miracle.
That was very, very cryptic. And that's the thing. They play a cryptic game. They have to.
You've
play a
been here
cryptic
55 days, and you went from Idlib suddenly to running the whole country. What was it like in those first few days? What surprised you? What was the most difficult thing about it? What have you learned most about yourself in the last 55 days?
يعني بداية أنا لما عندما كنا في إدلب
We established all the institutions in Idlib that we would need, and we fully prepared ourselves for government in terms of security and institutions and services. I was certain that a day would come when we would be in Damascus. 2 or 3 years ago, I would say in my speech that we would enter Damascus and Aleppo, and I would say this wasn't just to raise morale. I was speaking based on data. I relied on data to analyze our own strength, the social cohesion we had in Idlib, and compared that with the regime's situation, its economic collapse, societal fragmentation, and the condition of its army, as well as the interference of foreign countries inside the government.
بعض الدول الأجنبية في بنية الدولة أيضا.
Mr. President, when I was a politician, I found it very difficult to go from speaking quite a theoretical way. And then later, I realized that in the world of social media, Twitter, Facebook, I needed to open up and show my personality more. Is this something that you find a challenge? Is it difficult going from being in a secret organization to then having to share more of your personality with your people?
كل مرحلة لها
Each stage has its own circumstances. In Idlib, I engaged
This
openly
interview
with
is
people
so
managing
weird.
their affairs and
It
meeting all
seems like
segments
they're
of
like
society.
afraid
So I was a
almost.
political figure then
But
too,
I don't know if they're afraid.
though not to the
but-
extent that I am now in Damascus. As you know,
This
there
is
is a
somebody
different
new,
discourse in
and he is
times
from
of war
Al-Qaeda.
and in times of peace. It depends on the circumstances and what is needed and what is required of people in each
ينبغي أن
stage.
يقوم بها المرء في اللحظة الراهنة.
So, for example, I've learned to speak about my children. I have 2 sons, 7 and 9. Are you going to be able to talk about your sons and your family? Will this be part of being president?
تأكيد في الموقع
Certainly,
الذي أشعره
in the position I hold today, my family will naturally be part of the picture. I don't mean they will be involved in the work itself, but people have the right to know who my family is, who my children are, and how we live. The requirements of the presidency in Syria today are different from just managing Idlib, and I believe this is a part of the role.
من البديهيات في العمل يعني.
Can you tell us a little bit about your children, their personalities, their ages?
أنا لدي زوجة
I
واحدة.
have one wife, although the media often says I have more, but I have just one, and I have 3 children. We have shared living through hardships, but I made sure to shield them from any potential danger. Before we entered Damascus, I kept any information about them private, as the situation was tough. The war was still ongoing and security concerns required extreme caution.
أما في وضع السودان في دمشق يختلف هذا الأمر.
Some of the people we've spoken to today, they describe you, I don't know if this translates well, but they describe you as a control freak, somebody who has to be in control. Do you identify with that? And do you feel that in your position you have to be in control?
يعني الإنسان لا يستطيع أن
That's
يقيم
good
نفسه.
to
Persons
have, but
can't
it
really
can be
evaluate
bad.
themselves. It's better to leave judgment to
If
others
left
than to
unchecked.
speak about one's own qualities. I like work to be done well, and for those doing it, to be conscious of their responsibilities. It is not about control. Every task needs to be guided by strong moral values to be done properly. Given the challenge we have been through, if we hadn't maintained those values, we wouldn't be where we are today. For example, when we were advancing towards Damascus through Aleppo, Hama, and Homs, we had a big force of fire.
Yo, alright, so we've already gone through 21 minutes and 32 seconds out of a 48-minute video. We are at a live of 31 minutes and 42 seconds. So with that, I at least want to give a shout out and give a hoorah to the page that put out this interview, which is The Rest in Politics Leading. Go and give them a like, share, and a subscribe so you can see what they are talking about. Yeah, because this is definitely interesting. I did not know who this person was, and this person has a story. They have definitely a pretty interesting story. Going from being a kid, normal life, going to school, going through high school, and then joining the military, and then getting imprisoned, then to come out, go back and join in the military, but then ultimately you wind up into what they said Al-Qaeda is, a CIA operative agency that, that built Al-Qaeda. And is he a government asset? Is he a U.S. mole? Is he part of the U.S. government and playing to get inside of Syria? Who knows? But that's why we're just listening to this and seeing what his expressions are and how he talks and how cryptic he is. He's all right. He seems all right, but he definitely has some wordings of cryptic to himself. But for someone who has lived in a life of secrecy and then come out as public, it's kind of hard not to be cryptic. I'm definitely very cryptic, and I'm basically a loner, but it is what it is. But I just wanted to give a shout out to The Rest is Politics Leading. Thank you for letting me show off this video. I will definitely tag y'all into this so you can know. Yeah, keep doing what y'all are doing, and let's get back into this, okay? All right, word. Boom.
Fighters, and Syria was deeply divided due to the regime's actions. A major issue could have easily arisen, putting national peace at great risk. If there hadn't been control and respect for leadership decisions, people might have taken actions that would have harmed the public and destabilized social order. I had multiple responsibilities, including military leadership and community management. Military leadership requires a high level of discipline and control. while community management demands a totally different approach. I don't rule society with military theories. It is a civilian matter that involves distinct methods and tools, unlike military tactics.
شأن مدني ويحتاج إلى أساليب مختلفة وأدوات مختلفة في إدارة المجتمع.
What do you think of Donald Trump?
والله أنا بالشرق الأوسط.
In the Middle East, there are many different views on President Trump during his return from 2016 to 2020. I believe that Trump has brought positive messages during his current administration. He is focused on domestic policy and revitalizing the US economy. He is also interested in peace building in the Middle East, as it has caused quite a bit of instability over the past 2 decades. I view this as a promising start from President Trump.
But wouldn't you say that you were part of making that chaos
future
inside
US
the Middle
policy
East
in the region?
Because of
I am optimistic
who you were involved
that
with?
if the ideas proposed during his campaign become reality, he will play a big role in achieving global peace, especially, in my opinion, if he ends the war between Russia and Ukraine.
لإيقاف حرب بين روسيا وأوكرانيا.
Two things that seem to be very serious about Donald Trump. Number one is that he seems to be talking about the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. He's talking about moving Palestinians to Egypt and Jordan. And then the second is the question of sanctions against Syria. What are your opinions on these two things?
أنا أعتقد أن ليست هناك يعني قوة.
I believe no power can drive people from their land. Many countries have tried to do it, and they have all failed, especially during the recent war in Gaza over the past year and a half. The people endured pain, killing, and destruction, yet they refused to leave their land. Over 80 years of this conflict, all attempts to displace them have failed. Those who left have regretted their decision. The Palestinian lesson that every generation has learned is the importance of holding on to their land. It would be neither wise nor morally or politically right for Trump to lead an effort to force Palestinians out of their land, in my view. Why is he pushing Mexicans out of America now? He is doing the same thing. I believe this is a serious crime that will ultimately fail.
أن تحدث. أعتقد أنها لن تنجح.
And sanctions?
Sanctions against Syria?
العقوبات يعني
Sanctions were imposed on the previous regime during its systematic crimes, including mass killings. Some documents were made public, and the US reacted by imposing sanctions. Now that we have dismantled the regime and its prisons, these sanctions should be lifted, as there is no justification for them after the fall of the regime.
بعد زوال.
I think you
What
got
are
to
you
gain
doing
that
to get those
trust.
sanctions lifted?
You
What's your
can't just
strategy
walk
to
in
get those
as a new
sanctions
president
lifted?
and demand that.
يعني التوافق.
There is
Oh.
a strong international
I think you need to play
consensus with
play your
everyone who
cards.
has visited Damascus
But
recently agreeing
we
that
can see.
sanctions should be lifted. Syria is currently facing major security challenges, and one of the direct solutions is through economic development. That is what we are focusing on now. Without economic growth, there can be no stability, and without stability, we risk creating an environment that fosters chaos and insecurity. All of these issues are interconnected and must be addressed.
All the problems on this planet, bar natural phenomena, are caused by human beings. They're caused by
Together.
Sorry about these skip ad things.
Mr. President, which country's economic model interests you most? For example, Singapore, Malaysia. Can you name one country which you're looking at, and what are you learning from it in terms of economic management?
لا يعني اطلعت على
I've
كثير.
reviewed several countries that have experienced economic growth, like Singapore, Saudi Arabia, Brazil at certain points, and Rwanda, which overcame significant challenges to its development. Each country has its unique context, shaped by its specific challenges and stage of development. While we can draw valuable lessons from these examples, we shouldn't blindly replicate them. Instead, We need to adapt and blend these lessons to create an approach that fits Syria's unique situation.
لنخرج بشيء يتناسب مع الحالة السورية.
Is there any part of you that is overawed, overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge? You've got a country with a shattered economy, electricity supply difficult, oil supplies difficult, public services, unemployment. You've got a massive challenge. Is there not a part of you that just thinks, I wish somebody else was doing this?
نحن صحيح.
Yes, we inherited an exhausted country, and the regime destroyed everything before we took it over. But this is the challenge we, Syrians, must face. We must rebuild our country, and we do not shy away from this responsibility. There are many issues, but a clear mind tells us we must separate them and address them one by one, and set priorities so we can succeed and grow. Nothing is impossible. Despite difficulties, with God's will, we as Syrians are capable of rising up, rebuilding our country, and making it a regional and a global success story in the future, God willing.
في المستوى الإقليمي والدولي حتى في المستقبل إن شاء الله.
Mr. President, one challenge is that many of the people from the old security service, police and army have now left. And it reminds me a little bit of de-Baathification in Iraq. And de-Baathification in Iraq was a big problem because the security, the army intelligence went into the resistance and started fighting the government. How are you going to deal with this problem? Because even today in Damascus, many of the policemen are from Idlib.
أولا يعني هناك فرق كبير بين الوضع.
First of all, there are big differences between the situation in Syria and in Iraq. Comparisons always show up big differences. First, I did not dissolve the Syrian army without having an alternative. I brought the alternative with me, an existing institution and a military academy that produces officers. There were many defected former officers who are now gradually rejoining the current Ministry of Defense. The former regime's army did not resemble the Iraqi army. It was fragmented with many militias and foreign interventions from Iran and Russia. The army was fragmented and collapsed. A large number of young men were fleeing Syria to escape mandatory conscription. So the army did not have much significance for Syrians. Today, I did not impose mandatory conscription in Syria. Instead, I opted for voluntary enlistment, and today thousands are joining the new Syrian army.
في
Yeah, okay. So I definitely have feelings on this. He has charisma. Just like Trump. Just I don't know, he's got a sense to him. And look, he's platted out with gold. Basically.
الجيش السوري الجديد.
When you were a fighter, did you do anything that you regret?
أنا كنت حريص جدا أن يعني لا يتعرض.
I was very careful to ensure that no civilians were harmed in our battles, despite widespread popular calls to target the cities and villages held by the regime. Just as they relentlessly bombed towns and cities outside their control, we refused to do the same. For nearly 14 years, we endured systematic bombing of our villages and towns without ever retaliating against the regime in kind. I focused on targeting the regime's core strengths, such as the army and the security forces and other groups it relied on to fight the people. I avoided any side battles altogether. It's natural for a person to make mistakes and then correct them.
All right.
It is
so
very
we're
important
actually gonna go
to be
back
at peace with
about
oneself.
45 seconds.
spread popular calls to target the cities and villages held by the regime. Just as they relentlessly bombed towns and cities outside their control, we refused to do the same. For nearly 14 years, we endured systematic bombing of our villages and towns without ever retaliating against the regime in kind. I focused on targeting the regime's core strengths, such as the army and the security forces and other groups it relied on to fight the people. I avoided any side battles altogether. It's natural for a person to make mistakes and then correct them. It is very important to be at peace with oneself, to review one's actions at every stage, identify mistakes, and most importantly, not repeat them.
Speaking in a
This
spiritual
has been
aspect.
my approach to our work. I don't claim to be free of mistakes, quite the opposite. We made some mistakes, but they never reached the point of harming
لم
civilians.
تصل إلى الحد الذي كان يعني يؤذي الناس المدنيين أو غيرهم.
What is the psychological impact of living a life which has been secret for 20 years? What does that mean for your mind, your body, your soul to have to live a secret life for 20 years?
يعني هي لم تكن سرية بالمعنى المتخفي.
It wasn't secret in the sense of being hidden and out of sight around the clock. I had a lot to do with daily meetings all day round, along with the time allocated for public relations. I wasn't hiding in the way some might imagine, except in certain situations involving battles or war, which required caution. Hence, I did not live a life isolated from people at all. I lived alongside them while keeping some matters confidential. Now, in my new position, I don't mind sharing this with everyone because the work conditions we faced before have completely changed and we are in a new phase today.
كان في السابق اليوم انتقلنا إلى مرحلة أخرى تماما.
But there was a $10 million bounty on your head. It must have been very difficult to trust people if the American government was going to pay someone $10 million for killing you. It must have been stressful.
So, I'm not gonna lie. This is something that we should worry about. And the reason why I say this, the reason why I say that we should worry, he is an active military person. There's other people, world leaders, they don't go into the battle. They sit in their office or in their bunkers. This guy has been out in the wars. He has had influence. And if anybody knows Al-Qaeda, how long has Al-Qaeda been around? The funding. Now I know Trump took out ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but as what is being shown, he was part, so you didn't get everybody. So this is something to really watch out for. In the Middle East, Syria really could become a powerhouse. And if that happens, there's got to be a way of diplomatic resolutions to that, because what I hear and what I see is the beginning makings of a warlord. I don't say this stuff lightly. I say this stuff whenever I really feel it. I think we are watching the beginnings of a warlord in the Syrian armies. So this is all for entertainment purposes, YouTube. All right. They're speaking the interview. I'm just observing and speaking my own thoughts and opinions onto this. So thank you. Oh, no.
They relentlessly bombed towns and cities outside their control. We refused to do the same. For nearly 14 years, we endured systematic bombing of our villages and towns without ever retaliating against the regime in kind. I focused on targeting the regime's core strengths, such as the army and the security, identify mistakes, and most importantly, not repeat them. This has been my approach to our work. I don't claim to be free of mistakes, quite the opposite. We made some mistakes, but they never reached the point of harming civilians.
تصل إلى الحد الذي كان يعني يؤذي الناس المدنيين أو غيرهم.
What is the psychological impact of living a life which has been secret for 20 years? What does that mean for your mind, your body, your soul to have to live stressful? It must have been very difficult.
The Syrian people free, while
it must have been very difficult to trust people.
Matters confidential, involving battles or war, which required caution. Hence, I did not live a life isolated from people at all. I lived alongside them while keeping some matters confidential. Now, in my new position, I don't mind sharing this with everyone because the work conditions we faced before have completely changed and we are in a new phase today.
في السابق اليوم انتقلنا إلى مرحلة أخرى تماما.
But there was a $10 million bounty on your head. It must have been very difficult.
An exhausted country and the regime.
إقليمي والدولي حتى في المستقبل إن شاء الله.
I'm sorry, y'all.
One challenge is that many of the people from the old security service, police and army have now left. And it reminds me a little bit of de-Baathification in Iraq. And de-Baathification in Iraq.
Did you do anything that you regret?
أنا كنت حريص جدا أن
significance for Syrians. Today, I did not impose mandatory conscription in Syria. Instead, I opted for voluntary enlistment. And today, thousands are joining the new Syrian army.
Okay, right here.
الجيش السوري الجديد.
When you were a fighter, did you do anything that you regret?
أنا كنت حريص جدا.
Ooh, that's a big
I was
question.
very careful to ensure that no civilians were harmed in our battles, despite widespread popular calls to target the cities and villages held by the regime. Just as they relentlessly bombed towns and cities outside their control, we refused to do the same. For nearly 14 years, we endured systematic bombing of our villages and towns without ever retaliating against the regime in kind. I focused on targeting the regime's core strengths, such as the army and the security forces and other groups it relied on to fight the people. I avoided any side battles altogether. It's natural for a person to make mistakes and then correct them. It is very important to be at peace with oneself, to review one's actions at every stage, identify mistakes, and most importantly, not repeat them. This has been my approach to our work. I don't claim to be free of mistakes, quite the opposite. We made some mistakes, but they never reached the point of harming civilians.
Okay. I don't know, this is weird. We're rewatching part of this.
What is the psychological impact of living a life which has been secret for 20 years? What does that mean for your mind, your body, your soul to have to live a secret life for 20 years?
يعني لم تكن سرية بالمعنى المتخفي.
It wasn't secret in the sense of being hidden and out of sight around the clock. I had a lot to do with daily meetings all day round, along with the time allocated for public relations. I wasn't hiding in the way some might imagine, except in certain situations involving battles or war, which required caution. Hence, I did not live a life isolated from people
Yeah,
at
back to
all.
where we were.
I lived alongside them while keeping some matters confidential. Now, in my new position, I don't mind sharing this with everyone because the war conditions we faced before have completely changed and we are in a new phase today.
كانت في السابق اليوم انتقلنا إلى مرحلة أخرى تماما.
But there was a $10 million bounty on your head. It must have been very difficult to trust people if the American government was going to pay someone $10 million for killing you. It must have been stressful. It must have been very difficult.
يعني إدلب كانت منفتحة.
Idlib was very open to people. I would meet with delegations from abroad and had many interactions with journalists. I also had regular meetings with universities, professors, and various ministries. I was committed to serving the people, defending them, building institutions, and working towards reaching Damascus to topple this regime and set the Syrian people free. While performing my duties, I did not give much consideration to the $10 million bounty. I didn't believe anyone would seek this bounty by killing a person who was dedicated to serving the people.
يقضي على شخص ويسعى في خدمة الناس.
Do you still consider yourself to be a revolutionary?
أنا أعتقد أن العقلية الثورية
I believe that a revolutionary mindset cannot build a country. You need a different mindset when it comes to building a country and managing an entire society. For me, the revolution, in its previous sense, ended with the overthrow of the regime. Now, we have moved on to a new phase, which involves rebuilding the country, economic development, striving for regional stability and security, reassuring neighboring countries, and establishing strategic relationships between Syria and Western countries, as well as regional
دول
countries.
الغرب وبين دول الإقليم في المنطقة.
Did you always want to be president? Even when you were a fighter, were you thinking this is part of politics? I want to go and I want to run the country. Were you thinking that back then?
يعني الذي
Whoever lives through an experience like ours doesn't care much about what positions they get. We are living in times where the leader makes the position. It is not the position that makes the leader. We faced major challenges, and we needed a high level of moral integrity to reach where we are today. Aiming for the presidency as an end goal is the wrong mentality. We focus on serving the people, regardless of the position we hold.
المنصب المناط بنا.
Final question from me. When you see what the Western media says about you, what makes you angry and what do you think they don't understand about what you're doing?
I don't maybe have time to follow Western media, but Syria is a crucial country with a strategic location that has a global impact. Previously, the regime intentionally displaced people to Europe and trafficked Captagon to both Europe and the region. It also used Damascus as a base for steering broader instability in the region, because of the very negative role that certain other countries were playing inside Syria. Today, Syria's situation has changed drastically, becoming a new region with a promising future. It will play a major role in regional stability, sustained through economic development. Syria will also be a key hub in sectors like agriculture, industry, and trade. It is situated on the historic Silk Road. Trade between East and the West will again thrive. The West should reconsider its view of Syria from this angle.
الغرب ينبغي أن ينظر إلى سوريا من هذه الزاوية اليوم.
Mr. President, thank you. We really appreciate it. And very good luck on your trip to Turkey tomorrow.
A discussion like this requires us to be a bit more relaxed. I mean more than this. Today they took advantage of our fatigue. Next time I will come well rested and fully awake.
نايم منيح وجايكم أنا صاحي يعني.
Inshallah, next time we can sit down. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, Alistair, it was quite an event. I mean, sitting there with him in
Interesting.
his beautiful gold tie and suit, and both of us implicated in the Iraq War, and him as an Al-Qaeda Iraq man now become a presidential leader. It was also, I suppose, probably for listeners, frustrating in bits. I mean, I think as he makes this transition from secret terrorist to public politician, there's still many things he's not opening up about. I think you said afterwards that one of the things was striking is that we're the first people, I think, who've got him to admit on record that he has 3 children. But we still don't know.
You don't know their age.
Are they boys? Are they girls? What are their ages? And I tried a couple of times to prompt him on that. And boy, was he not quite sharing what the details of those things are.
Because
but
what
I
if
think
he
this goes
doesn't have
back to this
kids?
point of being on a journey. He actually said, and you said when we were there, that the wives, and he was very adamant he only has one wife, because there are still all these rumors that he has several wives, and he's adamant he's got one wife and 3 children. But you were making the point that wives and children of these leaders are seen as legitimate targets, and therefore he went to great lengths to make sure nobody knew not just who they were but where they were. But he's now saying, so for example, when we were there, he did an event with his wife, his brother, who's the health minister, which itself raises one or two questions. But while we were there, he and his wife, who is a Russian, went to the opera and was sort of fated as they arrived, as they were being served, because people were fascinated to see this guy out with his wife. So I think they accept that is going to become part of this. What I thought was fascinating was how you said in the interview at one point, look, this is a bit weird for me because essentially, I'm paraphrasing, you lot were trying to kill me and you felt that we were trying to kill you. And although he says he doesn't speak English, I could tell he was understanding your question even before the interpreter came in. But I think even on stuff like that, he was basically saying, okay, I could really get into a long justification of why I fought in Iraq, why you people were the aggressors, etc. But he just kind of took a deep breath, sat back, and started to talk about the future again. Very, very political.
And I mean, doubtless there'll be people in his team who will be cross with our tone, but we really hope that we can follow through on his offer, which is that he's offered to do a 10-part series with us on Al-Qaeda.
On the history of and the various formulations.
If he's serious about that, it would be unbelievable, because he is the most senior surviving member of Al-Qaeda worldwide.
Yeah.
I mean, he's almost the only person who can give us a blow-by-blow.
Exactly.
I mean, most of the other leadership are dead.
Yeah, they've all been killed.
Yeah.
His immediate final boss, I mean, obviously Baghdadi was killed, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was killed, Bin Laden was killed, but the man that he eventually pledged allegiance to, who was called Zawahiri, was killed by the Americans in Kabul quite recently. After, of course, having lost a wife and children in various different attacks, which relates to your previous point. It was also, I thought, going back to our days in government, what it really reminds me of, these kind of interviews,
Why?
in their sort of stiffness and their
That's
small
crazy.
clues, is something that we used to call...
That's crazy, because with everything that's been going on, this dude that is now the president of Syria, like, this isn't someone who is working to become the president of Syria. This right now is the president of Syria. One, as you just heard them say, if the only last member left that was from Al-Qaeda, but if he can already have people building up, what's to say that he's just not going to follow into that mindset? Then you know what happens after that. Wow. What a crazy world we're living in, y'all. The world that we live in is a crazy, phenomenal place. There is a lot of things that you do not know is going to happen, and you're only going to know when it happens. But that's why we do this. That's why people out here try to throw out the information so y'all know, because to get blindsided by information and not know about people that are becoming into power in different nations, in different countries, we really have to know that. So I am so glad that I heard about this guy, because I probably, if I probably would have waited another 2 weeks, who knows? Who knows what could have taken place? And I think this video was actually this was 4 months ago. So, well, then there you have it. There you have it. 4 months ago. And I'm now finding out about this interview. So within 4 months, this guy has been running Syria, and he was a part of Al-Qaeda. And why has no one talked about this? Why is mainstream media not talking about this? Okay, well, that's the end of this video, guys. I am done. I've got some bedtime. I gotta get up early, but we will be back again tomorrow, and we will figure out what we are going to talk about. I'll think about what we're going to talk about. But until then, stay safe, stay weary, stay watchful, stay vigilant, because the devil prowls like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour at any moment. So always be ready and be on guard, and look up to the Heavenly Father, because you never know when something's just going to rain from above and wipe out all the enemies. Just saying. Peace out, guys. Have a good night.